You may have never heard of a group called Media Matters, and even though it's only a few years old, it's already a very influential organization in Washington and the news media.
Now a new investigation has raised some important questions about Media Matters. John Jessup has the story from Washington.
Media Matters of America is a nonprofit liberal watchdog group dedicated to, quote, correcting conservative misinformation in the U.S. media. In an investigative series, the Daily Caller website found that Media Matters' impact on many major news organizations to be profound. Through interviews and an obtained memo, the Daily Caller also reported Media Matters has, to a great extent, achieved its central goal of influencing the national media. The editor of the Washington Times opinion blog agrees.
This story that the Daily Caller put out, you have some sources that were inside of Media Matters that have said that they practically wrote MSNBC's primetime lineup.
The Daily Caller also found Media Matters operates in regular coordination with the highest levels of the Obama White House, as well as with members of Congress and progressive groups around the country. And when it comes to media, Pickett says no one is safe, and that Media Matters will target anyone who doesn't agree with their left-wing views.
They like to portray themselves as a media watchdog of conservatives. While they will go after, say, Fox News, who they like to say is conservative, they'll also go after generally any broadcaster who they believe is not towing their line.
Media Matters also targets religious organizations. The Daily Caller reports Media Matters accepted a $50,000 grant from the ARCA Foundation in 2006 to monitor and attack religious news outlets, including CBN. Since then, Media Matters published at least 65 articles on CBN, along with others about Jerry Falwell and James Dobson. Leaders of the National Religious Broadcasters addressed the allegations Monday at its 69th annual convention in Nashville. They said it was clear Media Matters had been attempting to specifically attack Christian broadcasters.
It appears clear that this was not an investigation and a campaign of intimidation against religious broadcasters. It was specifically focused on Christian broadcasters.
CBN News reached out to Media Matters for a response. They have not returned our call. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Well, joining us now from Washington is Alex Pappas. He's the reporter for Daily Caller, and he worked on their special series on Media Matters. Alex, welcome to the 700 Club.
Oh, good morning.
Well, you certainly have my attention with this series. Why did the Daily Caller decide to investigate Media Matters?
Well, first off, this is a story that I don't think it probably surprises you that a lot of people in the other media aren't necessarily chasing right now. And listen, we just had, we spent months, we spent weeks talking to people, sources that were inside, looking at memos, to give us a glimpse of what sort of organization this is. And the reason it's important is because we know they're influential. They have the ear of the White House. We know that they're able to get the message they want out to media organizations, whether it's MSNBC, as you talked about in the package, or the Washington Post or Politico. I mean, this is an organization that it's a nonprofit. It says it's an educational organization there to talk about fairness in the media. But we know really they have more of a political agenda. They're there about essentially trying to make sure that they can keep non-liberal voices off of the media, whether it's Fox News, whether it's CBN. And so that's what, we were talking, one of the things we uncovered in this investigation was that back in 2006, they accepted a grant for $50,000 to monitor broadcasts such as this one. We know you guys are pretty popular with them, and most likely they're watching this broadcast right now. They spent, I mean, we found at least 65 stories they've done on CBN.
Yeah, I imagine they're watching us right now, Alex. I would say we're one of their major targets. Tell us about the foundation that gave the grant, the ARCA Foundation.
Yeah.
What is it? Where did it come from?
Yeah, so we know the ARCA Foundation, they give lots of money to Democratic causes. They were, at the time, they actually gave the $50,000 grant to Media Matters to watch these Christian broadcasters. They were being chaired by Donna Edwards, who actually now is a Democratic congresswoman from Maryland. We know they've given money to places, groups that were associated with ACORN, the infamous community organizing group. We also know they've given money to the organization that runs the liberal magazine, Mother Jones. So, I mean, obviously, this is a group that has a political agenda. They want to hurt Republicans. They want to hurt conservatives. They want to help liberals. And they see that by giving money to this group, they can go and try to vilify those who go on, conservatives, and go on networks that allow them to speak their mind on what they want to talk about.
Your articles go into depth, particularly on David Brock, the head of Media Matters, and how he's boasted that he's responsible for Glenn Beck getting off Fox News. He's responsible for Lou Dobbs being taken out of CNN. Why would you target an individual voice and say, we're going to make sure they're no longer broadcasting?
Well, I mean, it's like we said. I mean, I think part of their major goal is making sure that non-liberal voices cannot be heard. I mean, that is what they want to do. We saw it as recently as last week with Pat Buchanan on MSNBC. They were very important with some of the other groups in trying to make sure that Pat Buchanan, who is a conservative voice on that network, wasn't able to speak anymore. And part of the strategy that they use, they will go and find something that you said or wrote. You were on TV. And they'll pull a clip, and if they'll try to embarrass you, if they can tar you as a racist, as a homophobe, or as something like that, broad strokes, and essentially stigmatize you to where you're just toxic, they hope that by doing that, then media organizations will be afraid to talk to you, and therefore your message won't get out. I mean, critics of the organization say that's exactly what they're doing, and that's exactly why they went after Lou Dobbs and Glenn Beck and Pat Buchanan and others like that.
Don't they also target the advertisers? One of the things that your article gets into is part of the attack is to go after major advertisers on these news channels and say, if you continue to have this news commentator, we're going to have a concerted campaign against your advertising clients, so they will no longer advertise with you.
Yeah, we know they were in the process of doing that, especially with Lou Dobbs. We talked with people about that. And because of these sorts of things, Media Matters is supposed to be an educational group. Critics say, well, I mean, this looks pretty activist. There have been questions now about whether they should retain their 501c3 nonprofit status because they're saying, are you being a charity? I mean, are you really being charitable, or are you being more of a partisan activist? And so we've talked with lawyers about this, and there have been people that have raised this as a question. The NRB, as you mentioned in your package earlier, they're one. I got off the phone with an official from there yesterday who said they would welcome the IRS taking a look into Media Matters and just seeing that if what they're doing complies with what they're supposed to be doing as a nonprofit.
How close do you think the ties are? I mean, do you have any evidence of coordination?
With who, the White House or with the media?
White House, Democratic National Committee, any of the other campaigns?
What we do know is that they do have a history, and we know of specific examples of officials from Media Matters going to the White House, meeting with people like Valerie Jarrett, who's arguably one of the president's closest advisors, Anita Dunn, who was a communications person there for a while. And what was really interesting is that we know was that Media Matters and Fox News were both using this talking point against Fox News around the same time. Media Matters came out at one point and said that Fox News is essentially a wing of the Republican Party, and therefore people shouldn't cooperate with them because they're not a news organization. And very shortly after that, we saw the White House using those same talking points. So we obviously know that that sort of message very easily could have been being discussed between the two groups. We also know that Media Matters participates in conference calls and weekly meetings with other progressive groups that are meeting with White House officials. So I mean, it's clear that these guys at Media Matters have the ear of the Obama administration.
What about coordination with what we would call, I guess, mainstream media? Are they just taking Media Matters reports and trying to masquerade that this is real news and just taking it word for word?
Well, what we know is that's what Media Matters likes to do is they call this sort of fingerprint coverage, where if they can call up a reporter and say, here's a sort of story that we think that would be good for you to cover, you should write about it, but we don't want our fingerprints anywhere on it. And so in talking with these sources that we had over at Media Matters, they told us that, there were groups reporters at places like Politico and at the Washington Post and MSNBC, they're very receptive to that. Now, I mean, of course, I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, and I talk with plenty of different people and plenty of different groups that are pitching me on stories all the time, but I do think it's interesting to know what reporters out there do Media Matters find easiest to get to, and they told us some of those names.
What do you think this means, I guess, long term for America, for free speech? If you have groups that seem to have access and they are intentionally targeting individual voices and saying, we don't want this voice in our media anymore, what does that mean for us?
Well, I know people that we've talked to, the sort of people that are saying that are asking whether Media Matters should still be, a nonprofit. I mean, they say that this is just showing the way the media is going. You're going to start looking at outlets where, and the idea of what Media Matters wants, they want an MSNBC or a Washington Post that doesn't include voices from conservatives. I mean, they want only liberal voices on there. And that's, the day that they can turn on MSNBC and not have a single conservative represented, I think that's when they'll be happy. And, of course, critics that we've talked to, they don't necessarily think that's great for journalism here in America.
Well, Alex, thanks for being with us, and thank you for this very interesting report. You can find Daily Caller series on Media Matters just by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Gordon, Greece has negotiated a second massive bailout package in hopes of escaping its debt problems. Skeptical European politicians, however, still need to approve that deal. It also requires more unpopular government cutbacks. Greeks have shown their displeasure with those austerity measures, with violent protests in recent weeks. Even if it is approved, the plan is not likely to mean the end of the European debt crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will head to Washington to meet with President Obama in early March. What to do about Iran's nuclear program will be the focus of their talks. The U.S. has been urging Israel to be patient and wait for economic sanctions to have an impact, but Netanyahu says the sanctions are not working. Many analysts expect Israel to launch a military strike in the next several months on Iran. Iran could execute imprisoned Pastor Youssef Nadarkhani soon. The situation there is reportedly getting increasingly dangerous for the pastor. Nadarkhani has been sentenced to death for apostasy. Members of Congress are condemning Iran for its treatment of the Iranian Christian pastor. Pennsylvania Republican Joe Pitts and 7 other congressmen introduced a resolution in the House. It condemns Iran for its, quote, persecution, imprisonment, and sentencing of Pastor Nadarkhani. Gordon?
This is a very serious situation. We've been covering this for months now and have asked the UN to intervene, have asked the State Department, both of whom have tried. Please pray for him. It looks like he's facing execution, and Iran seems to be increasingly hardline and doing a whole lot of saber rattling in the middle of a very tense situation. So pray especially for our president, that he would have wisdom as he faces the very difficult times that we all are looking at going forward in the world today.
Thousands of pastors and evangelical leaders are joining Roman Catholics in opposing President Obama's contraception coverage mandate. More than 2,500 evangelicals signed a letter urging the president to reserve the requirement for church-affiliated groups to carry insurance providing free birth control, and that includes sterilizations and the morning after pill. A British court of appeals has upheld a $5,800 fine against a Christian husband and wife for refusing to rent a room to a gay couple. Peter and Hazel Mary Bull own a bed and breakfast, but they don't rent rooms to unmarried couples, straight or gay. The judge ruled the Bulls violated a law protecting gay rights and fined them. The Bulls appealed, citing their policy renting rooms only to people who are married. They say they're unwilling to compromise their biblical principles. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com